Welcome back to The Book Stop. I'm so excited to talk about today's episode. Fair warning moving forward, this podcast does contain spoilers as we go over major events within the novels. Before we get into it, don't forget to follow us on Apple, Spotify, and Instagram at The Book Stop Podcast. And we're back with another episode of The Book Stop. Today I have a new guest onto the show. I have Patrick. So why don't you go ahead and introduce the book that you brought for today, and why did you bring it?
Today I brought Pet Sematary by Stephen King. Since it's October, I thought a spooky book would be fitting, and Stephen King is one of my favorite horror authors, and Pet Sematary is my favorite book by Stephen King.
Awesome. Yeah, this is actually my very first experience with Stephen King at all. I've never read any of his books. I've never seen any of his movies, so I've obviously heard about Stephen King because he's a very well-known writer, but I went in completely blind on this one, and I think that made the experience definitely better.
This is an interesting one to start with. It's one of his most morbid books, so.
Yeah, for sure. A little bit about Stephen King, so if you don't know for some reason who he is. He is a author of American horror, those types of books. He's published 63 books, which I feel like he wrote a lot more than that.
He has some short stories.
He has over 200 short stories, but 63 published books. I was reading a little bit about him, and I found it interesting that he was inspired by H.P. Lovecraft. It was a book that his father gave him when he was younger. I just did a H.P. Lovecraft, so listen to that one and then come back to listen to this one and you'll see the connections. For this one, I was reading how this one became a book, and Stephen King had a really hard time publishing this one because of how morbid it was, but also because similar events happened in his life where his daughter's cat gets hit by a car, and then when this stuff was happening, he started thinking really morbid thoughts and then decided to put it into a book. I feel like that in the mindset of Stephen King, it definitely adds a little bit more to the story. But yeah, we're going to jump right into it. We're going to play a little game to get us started here.
Okay.
We are going to play a little summary game. So you're going to have 30 seconds to summarize this book. Just try your best. I know it's a very long and detailed book, so try your best, but in 30 seconds, just try to summarize it for us.
What happens in Pet Sematary? A summary would be a man named Lewis takes his family to rural Maine to start a new life, but what ends up happening is death. There's a road, and the road plays a pretty central part in the book, and it causes a lot of turmoil for Lewis. It kills many members of his family, and the title Pet Sematary comes from the actual Pet Sematary where a lot of bad things happen.
All right. So I'm going to summarize it really quick for anybody that hasn't read the book or hasn't heard anything about the book. So Dr. Lewis Creed moves his family to Maine, where he meets the friendly local named Judd Crandall. After the Creed's cat is accidentally killed, Judd advises Lewis to bury it in the ground near the old pet cemetery. The cat returns back to life, but its personality is changed for the worst. When Lewis's son Gage dies tragically, Lewis decides to bury the boy's body in the same grounds, despite the warning Judd has given him, and his actions have devastating consequences. This one, before we even get started, I'm definitely going to put a little warning here that this book is very dark, it's very morbid. We're going to talk about a lot of very dark scenes. There is character death in here, so if that isn't your thing, then I wouldn't advise listening to this episode. We're going to just jump into it. What is your favorite quote from this book?
I have two favorite quotes.
Okay.
My first favorite quote is when Ellie is learning that the road could potentially lead to her cat's death. She says, "I don't want Church ever to be dead. He's my cat. He's not God's cat. Let God have his own cat."
Yes, classic.
That's one of my favorite quotes because it's such an innocent child understanding of death. And she just thinks that God is this being that just takes her cat if it's dead and doesn't really understand the complexity of death.
Yeah, this is her first real approach to it because our family's never mentioned it before. So yeah, I like the innocence of it.
My other favorite quote is just the last word spoken in the book, in the epilogue, darling,
Oof, oof, chills.
which
Honestly,
I get chills every time that I read that quote.
yes. I know, like, if you've never read it, you're probably like, what? But the events that lead up to that, and then you just hear that word, it's like, I don't know, it just sends like a chill up your spine because you're like, oh my gosh, okay.
I'm getting chills just thinking about it, honestly.
Yeah, that one, just one single word. It's so good. I think that's a great way to end the story. It leaves it with like a little bit of a cliffhanger, but you get to see that all the actions that he did to get there, it proven that it worked. So,
Hmm.
and it makes me think of what happened next, like what's going to happen, like how is this going to work? So the quote that I brought was, it's a little bit after the funeral of his son, and it's described as deep winter, but time passes and time wells into one state of a human feeling into another, until they become something like a rainbow. Strong grief turns into a softer, more mellow grief. Mellow grief turns into mourning. Mourning at last becomes remembrance. I really like that quote because it shows the stages of grief as well as like how it also isn't true for Lewis. Like he has a lot of flaws in his character, and I feel like his grief kind of stuck at that strong grief. He didn't really give it time for it to grow into anything else before he started taking these actions that lead him to the end of the story.
I like that quote too.
So yeah, we're gonna hop into this story. So what are some things that you do like about this book and some things that you don't like?
Of the Stephen King books that I've read, this is one of the ones that is more grounded in like a believable realism.
Mm-hmm.
Aside from like the resurrection parts of the book, I feel like the characters are the most grounded as opposed to like it, where that's more based in like a fantastical sense of horror, where this is just dealing with like such a human experience of death.
Mm-hmm. The characters feel more realistic, and that's one thing I really like about this story. I like how the characters all feel like they all have their own flaws, and there are not perfect characters. Like Lewis, for example, I think that he has a lot of anxiety and has seen a lot of really dark stuff while being a doctor.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that really shows really well. I also really like Rachel too. I think her background was very compelling,
Mm-hmm.
like her sister Zelda.
Yeah, I feel that Lewis's experience with death and Rachel's experience with death and how they deal with it are like perfect opposites, because Lewis comes at it from a medical point where he just understands that death is something that happens, and Rachel, with her experience with her sister, comes at it almost at the same like childlike experience as Ellie does, and she just doesn't deal with it and treats it as a dirty thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like that kind of shows like the entirety of the book. People are going to perceive it differently depending on like their own personal loss. I feel like
Mm-hmm.
somebody that has just recently lost somebody is going to hit them harder than somebody that's never lost anybody. I think that using the characters to kind of gauge that, I think he did a really good job on
Mm-hmm.
that. Another thing I really like is I really like his writing style. Not only on the characters, but also like the landscape around him. I love the country vibe of the story. Judd in particular, he's very country.
Very folksy.
Yeah. So I like the atmosphere that he gives with the story. But also his writing techniques are very good. The only thing I don't like is he does add a lot of detail that I feel like aren't extremely important in the story. I feel like it almost leads you astray, that you're like following these breadcrumbs and you're like, oh, how is this going to tie into the story? But
Mm-hmm.
some of them don't. I mean, obviously some do, but some of them don't. So it makes you kind of think, well, why did we add this in there if it doesn't really add anything to the story? Another little detail that I liked was I loved how the Pet Cemetery, how the title came to be. Because I always wondered, like, why is it spelt that way?
Mm-hmm.
And it got to me thinking, like, am I spelling cemetery wrong my entire life? But no, I really like how it was this plot of land that the kids come to bury their pets, and they named it Pet Cemetery and misspelled it when they were putting the sign up. So, and I'm glad he kind of added that in. It adds a little bit of lore to the land. I like that.
Definitely the lore to this area of the story is definitely interesting, with just that, even the pet cemetery's creation and the burial grounds beyond have such an interesting like lore to them. Just on the edge of the pet cemetery, there is this deadfall, which is just this mangled heap of wood and branches that really prevents anybody from going past it. And it could, to some, look like an accident, but in my mind, it's like an intentional barrier to keep people from going to the burial ground beyond, which is there's another cemetery up above the actual pet cemetery that is used. I think it was in like a Native American rituals.
Yeah.
And then even in the book it says it was there before that. But it's just this grounds that if you bury something, it comes back to life.
And we get that first like realization of that is when he buries Church in there.
Right. We kind of get a little introduction to it in his dream sequence with the man who dies on his first day of work. He has a dream of that man in his corpse form taking him to the pet cemetery and taking him beyond and saying, don't go beyond.
Yeah, I found the dream sequences to be very interesting because I had a hard time following the direction of the story. So, like I said, I have no idea what was going to happen, and I went in completely blind. So I was trying to like put the pieces together and figure out how it was going to end. And I really thought it was going to end in kind of like a dream state, because his dreams that he has them throughout the story, and they're so vivid.
Yeah.
He gets into such detail that I have a hard time telling if it even is a dream until he literally says, I wake up. So I felt like it was going to end in a dream, and then it just doesn't. And I was like, okay. I think it's always so funny that every horror or thriller or those kind of movies and books always starts with the characters moving into a new house. Like every time.
Yeah.
That's why I was like, oh, of course something bad's gonna happen because they're moving into a new house in the middle of nowhere. And I like the subtle hints of the roads at the beginning of the, or what did Judd call it?
The Rud.
The Rud?
Yes.
The Rud. At the beginning of the story, trying to figure out what's going to happen, and I'm like, okay, obviously something's going to happen about this road.
I mean, it takes this like idyllic country setting that they move into this nice country house where there's just fields and everything just seems so nice, and then there's just this impending doom of the road is they're warned of immediately. They're just like, this place is nice, and then their neighbor comes over and he's like, watch out for the road.
The road almost gives you like this foreshadowing, almost like you never know what's going to come around the corner.
Yeah.
Like anything can happen. You don't know what's coming. So personally, I would have put up some signs. If I got little kids, I would at least put up like a fencing around that road. Obviously, if you have like a 2-year-old, it's going to run towards the road one of these days. I would have put something up, but that's just me, I guess.
Fair. Yeah.
Yeah, so who in this story is your favorite character?
I would say my favorite character is Judd. Judd's like character and introduction just comes with such like a charm. His just whole presence and the accent that he has and the way that the accent is written is just such like a charming character. And like how he like genuinely cares, whether the care comes from an influence from the pet cemetery or just out of his genuine care for Lewis, their relationship is just pretty nice.
Yeah, I listened to the audiobook of this and I loved his accent, or
like the "ah."
Yeah. I grew up in the South, so my family talks like that. So it felt very nice hearing it. I was like, okay, I can get with these country vibes. So, yeah, I like Judd too. From the second that he was introduced, I thought it was a bit creepy, but at the same time, very heartfelt. Because I like the way that he interacts with the kids.
Yeah, the way he interacts with the kids is very wholesome.
It gives like grandpa vibes for sure. And that's why I chose for my favorite character Norma, because I liked her grandma vibes. I was very sad when she did pass. That one honestly hit me the hardest, I think, out of all of them. And obviously you knew that it was coming. She was very old. She had a lot of issues going on. But I like the connection that she had with all of the characters, with Judd and Lewis and the kids.
Yeah.
And Rachel too. So I think she was a very influential character. Wish she would have stayed around longer. I feel like she could have made more of an impact, but... So there is one quote I want to talk about. It's seen throughout the entire book, but it's the one where a man grows what he can and tends it. I almost brought that one as my favorite quote, but what do you think they're trying to portray in that? And like, why is it so redundant?
That quote is interesting, and the text that precedes it, where the soil of a man's heart is stonier, I think ties into a man grows what he can. Well, I think what they're trying to portray is a difference in how the men in the story perceive the emotions
Hmm.
as opposed to the women in the story.
You know, men's hearts are typically more guarded and
Yeah.
a little tougher.
Mm-hmm.
So he spends all this time making this family, and then he feels like it's getting torn apart. So he's doing whatever he can, and he feels like he's losing his mind, but he doesn't want to lose what he has. So that's why he's so torn about this, but wants to do what he thinks is right.
Yeah, exactly. I feel the descriptions that Stephen King does and writes in this book are just horrible, but they're so good.
Yeah.
Especially the scene where Lewis is digging up his son,
Hmm.
and he says, looking at his son was like looking at a badly made doll. I just feel like the way he describes that and how he really doesn't describe the death of Gage, like he kind of goes into this almost like spoiling of the death. Like it doesn't happen, he says it happens. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
He describes it like, oh, and Gage only had 2 months to live.
Yeah, that was the kite flying scene. He
Yes.
was like, "This is the best day we'll have for the next 2 months or something," because we
Hmm.
didn't see the
Yeah.
truck coming or something like that.
Yeah, he describes what happens without like showing what happens
Yes.
in the death. But I feel it's interesting that he chose to leave that out and then go into such grave detail of Lewis exhuming his son's corpse.
Like they put the details in very awkward situations, like the one with the first guy that passes. I can't remember his name.
Victor Pascal.
Yeah, on the first day of work, where he went into very gory like details about like everything that was wrong with him,
Mhm.
and like obviously he doesn't want to go into details about a child passing, but I found it interesting that he does kind of just give away the entire suspenseful part of the story.
Just like that big inciting incident is just kind of an afterthought in that situation.
Yeah, that was another thing I didn't really like about his writing style, is that he kind of gives a little too much foreshadowing away.
I see that. I feel in that scene the effect of him just giving that away, it was more of an interruption to the happy scene. Like we get this scene of Gage and his father bonding over a kite, and it's one of the most like happy moments in the book, and they interrupt it by foreshadowing Gage's death. I found it to be effective. I can see where it's not effective, where it breaks the suspense a little bit, but I feel like how it breaks the happiness is an effective thing.
I could definitely see if I was watching this in a movie, like that scene, and then like some static kind of breaking it up, and then you see like him at the funeral. That would have been like cool. But I haven't seen the movie, so I don't know how they kind of foreshadow that. So
They don't do that in the movie. In the movie,
oh,
they show a little kid getting hit by a truck.
oh my god.
Not really. They have like cutting scenes of the truck coming fast and the child running towards it,
Oh,
and
okay.
then a cap flying in the air.
Oh, okay. I'm about to
They
say.
show it without showing it.
Okay, gotcha. I really thought it was going to be Ellie,
Hmm.
the one that passes. I was pretty surprised that it was going to be Gage, or that it was Gage. That she was in it a lot more. So I feel like the connection between Ellie and the reader, I felt like there was a stronger connection. So I thought it was going to be her. But then when it said that it was Gage, I was like, whoa, surprised.
Yeah.
Brings me back to like church, because the cat ends up dying because it gets hit by a car.
Mm-hmm.
And it was the same way. Like I didn't feel like much connection to the cat. Again, saw it coming, but the cat dies. I didn't feel any connection. I only cared about like what Ellie was gonna feel.
I feel like that was intentional too.
Yeah.
To the cat almost is just an object to drive the plot forward and to bring out character development within Ellie.
I found it interesting that of course they weren't there when all of this happened. They were in Chicago. Same with the ending here.
Yeah.
That it felt kind of like a repeat. It was the same thing over and over happening again, but this time it was not the cat that he was taking.
Yeah.
So, who in this story is your favorite relationship?
It may seem like the obvious one, but my favorite relationship was between Judd and Lewis. The way they introduce the relationship is really nice. Begins with like Lewis, who had lost his father at 3 and who had never known a grandfather, never expected to find his father as he entered middle age. And I just like the almost paternal relationship that develops between Lewis and Judd,
Hmm.
and how Judd is almost a voice of guidance for Lewis and reassurance throughout the book.
You took the words right out of my mouth. I agree. That one was also my favorite relationship. I like how Judd just fits perfectly in this family. He
Yeah.
just slides right in. And I feel like because Judd doesn't have any kids, he felt the same way about Lewis. Like he felt him as a son,
Yeah.
as a grandfather to his kids. So I really like Judd and Lewis. I was really sad at the end when, Gage does come back and does all that stuff to Judd. I was like, no, it's so sad.
It's so sad and just horrible. It's sad and like almost traumatizing the way he kills Judd. Because he not only physically kills him, but he like emotionally torments Judd, which is horrible.
Same with Rachel.
Yeah.
I guess like jumping into the ending here. So after the funeral, they bury Gage in the cemetery, like a normal cemetery, and Lewis is slowly kind of thinking over this awful idea of bringing him back from the dead by burying him in the pet cemetery.
Yeah.
And he sends Rachel and Ellie to her parents in Chicago to kind of get her out of there so he could kind of formulate this plan. And Judd knows what's going on. Judd knows he has this idea at the back of his head, and he comes there and he warns him, like, don't do this.
I feel like it's important to mention that when they buried the cat, Lewis had asked Judd, has anyone ever buried a person up there? And Judd tells him no. And after the death of his son, Judd comes back and tells Lewis the story of when someone buried a person in the burying ground. It's like he almost wasn't ready to hear it at that point. But now, since Lewis is having the thoughts to bury his son, Judd lets him know what could happen.
Yeah, so he tells him the story, and Lewis kind of goes along with it anyways. He goes, gets the tools, and Rachel is already in Chicago at this point, and Ellie has a dream that something bad's going to happen, and Rachel is like, well, I have to get back, because she thinks that Lewis is going to commit suicide.
Mm-hmm.
I really like the playback between, like, Rachel, Judd, and Lewis at the end. You get all three of their perspectives, and everything is stopping all of them from, like, coming at Lewis. Like, Judd falls asleep because he feels like this power putting him to sleep, and Rachel is, she misses her flight.
Mm-hmm.
Her car breaks down. Like, all of these things are like stopping the ending to happen, but it still happens either way. So I really liked how he wrote that out.
Yeah.
I feel like it's better than just being with Rachel and then coming back, Gage is back, and all this kind of stuff. You gotta see all sides of the story.
Yeah. It was really very well woven together at the end there, how he just intertwined all of those stories that were all converging at the same point, but it was the obstacles keeping everyone from each other that really made like the tension build.
And then like he gets to Judd's house. At this point, Judd and Rachel have already passed because Gage has killed them, and he brings these syringes of morphine. He gives it to Church, and then he battles his son, who is a body of like a 2-year-old, 3-year-old, but is a full-grown man because he's being like possessed by. Is he possessed by the Wendigo, or is he like possessed by like a demonic creature?
I think it's the Wendigo.
I don't know how woven the Wendigo story is into it. The Wendigo has cursed the land, and so he's able to control the things that come out of the ground. So that's how, like, Gage is able to come back. I don't know a ton about the lore behind the Wendigo myself. I try to do a little research, but it's so much.
Mm-hmm.
There's so much into it. But yeah, it's a spirit that comes from the Native American culture, and it kind of lives within the undead things. So Gage was kind of possessed by the Wendigo, and that kind of compelled him to kill Judd and his mother.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like that was kind of out of left field a little bit with this book. I didn't really know where the direction of the story was going, but I didn't expect it to be a Wendigo, that's for sure.
Right. I feel like that adds to the mystery of just the whole area, though. It gives you this unknown presence that is just a force of destruction, and it has slight influence over things to greater bolster itself, like how it influenced Rachel and Judd from getting to Lewis in time to stop him. I think it's more than just the Wendigo.
Yeah.
in there. I think there's just a plethora of evil spirits in there. We have, I think one of my favorite parts of the book is trek up to the Micmac burying ground where they're burying Gage, and it almost feels like Judd is possessed in a way leading Lewis up there. He's kind of got a youthful step, just the comments that he makes. He says, you might see St. Elmo's fire, or what the sailors call foolites. It makes funny shapes, but it's nothing. If you see some other shapes and they bother you, just look the other way.
Mm-hmm.
It just creates this whole mystic sense up there.
It's a lot of like, you don't really know what's going on. There's not really one pinpoint thing.
Yeah.
There's a lot of different kind of evil, demonic things going up here. So,
Yeah.
yeah, it leaves a little open-ended.
Mm-hmm. The ending is definitely open-ended with that epilogue.
Yeah, because he does eventually bury Rachel up there and she comes back to life, and it's that line again where it's just, darling. Freaks me out every time.
Yes.
It makes me wonder, like, what happened to Ellie at the end? Did she just stay with her grandparents in Chicago? Because she left her there, right?
I don't know.
I hope she stayed with her parents, because she doesn't need to be in the middle of all that.
No.
I have a little game for us to play. Super easy. I have some quotes here from the book, and you're just going to have to fill in the blanks.
Oh, no.
I try to keep really easy quotes, something that I'm sure if you read it, you could probably figure it out.
Okay.
All right, so I'm going to read the quote, and then after, you're going to fill in the blank. So the first quote I have, cats are the blank of the animal world, living outside the law and often dying there. There were a great many of them who never grew old by the fire. I only remember this quote because I thought it was so funny that he said it.
Okay, so cats are the blank of the animal world. I'm going to guess because this quote is, I remember the quote, but I don't remember specifically.
Okay.
Is it assholes?
No.
Am I allowed to swear on your podcast?
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's fine. No, it's gangsters.
Gangsters. I was going to say rebels.
Oh, that was also a good one.
That would have been closer to gangsters. Okay.
Okay, next is only blank tell the whole truth. That's what makes them children.
Kids.
I'll give it, it's children, but I'll give you kids.
Yeah.
This one I almost brought as my favorite quote, but the next one is death is a mystery and blank is a secret.
Life.
Ooh, not life. Think of the opposite end.
Death. Oh no.
It's burial. So death is a mystery and burial is a secret.
Oh yeah. I am off my game.
It's okay. Okay. I don't think children ever forget the blanks their parents tell them.
The lies.
Yeah, the lies. Let God have his own blank.
Cat.
Yeah. Okay, next one's pretty hard. This is level 5. That lesson suggests that at the end, we can only find peace in our human lives by accepting the will of the blank.
That is a hard one. Universe.
Yep, it's universe. Yay! Is there anything else that you want to talk about?
I found it was interesting that there was just a repeating line or quote in the book of the Ramones song, Hey Ho, Let's Go.
Yeah.
I feel like that happened almost like preempting any bad things that were going to happen.
Yeah. Stephen King, especially in this one at least, he does a lot of repetition.
Mm-hmm.
Like, he repeats a lot of the same lines over and over again. Like the man grows what he can and tends it or whatever it was.
A man grows what he can and tends it.
Yeah. So that one he repeats throughout the entire book. Whenever a story does the repetition, it's usually to show like significance on a certain thing.
Mm-hmm.
So I really like how he did that. I think it makes you second guess everything he's saying. But you're like, okay, this is like the 16th time he said it. It means something.
Yes.
So I think it's a good way to prove your point and to get the reader to kind of pay a little bit more attention.
Yeah. I found it was interesting too that the first time that quote pops up is in the beginning of a chapter.
Mm-hmm.
And it starts off first with a quote from the Bible and then just a quote from the Ramones. Just that's such a strong juxtaposition, I think.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Now, is there anything in your opinion, anything that you would have changed or done differently? I can go first if you want.
Sure.
Okay. Personally would have done a little bit different is maybe have some of the backstory not be so dragged out. Personally, I really liked the Zelda story of Rachel's sister Zelda. It added to the story enough where it was okay to be kind of drawn out, but there was a lot of stuff that was added in that didn't add any significance to the story. So the only thing I would say is maybe taking out a couple pages of just backstory that didn't add any value. But that's about it. That's all I could think of.
I would agree to that to a certain extent. While I do enjoy Stephen King's writing style, and I could just read endlessly backstory to this, but I do agree that it was drawn out a little too much and that they could have gotten to the point a little bit quicker.
Yeah, I love a good backstory, but if it doesn't add any value, I feel like I'm kind of like wasting a little bit of time when I could have a little bit more detail into what's going on now. So
Yeah.
all right, so we're going to jump into our rating scale now, and we do it a little bit different here on the pod. We kind of make up our own thing. So I would give Pet Sematary 8.5 failed spelling tests out of 10. I say that because the kids that made the sign should have spell checked to make sure that they spelled it correctly. Because now we have an entire book that is spelled incorrectly. I really like this book because I haven't read a quote unquote scary book in a very, very long time.
Yeah.
So I think it was a kind of a little bit different than what I've been reading lately. So I really enjoyed that. I think that he knows how to tell a story and he knows how to tell a good one.
Mm-hmm.
So I say it's a good rating for this. I know a lot of people would probably not agree with that because I know a lot of people have their own views about this book and saying that it's like demented and kind of messed up, but at the same time it's like it's not real, it's art. So, and this is how he wants to portray his own art, so I give it to him.
Okay.
So I would give it that rating.
I would give Pet Sematary 9 out of 10 resurrected cats.
All right.
Because, as I said earlier, Stephen King is one of my favorite authors. I've come back to this book a lot more than other Stephen King books, and there's just something about this book that draws me in.
Yeah, I could definitely see the appeal.
Yeah.
Like I said, you can tell a story, that's for sure. All right, so we're kind of drawing to a close here. Thank you again so much for coming on to the book stop. I really, really appreciate it.
No problem.
I don't think we have an episode scheduled yet, but if you guys want to see Patrick back on, just interact with this episode. And yeah, thank you again.
Happy Halloween.
Thank you for turning the pages with us this week. If you've enjoyed this episode, show your support on social media. Don't forget to turn on your notifications to get a reminder of the next episode. Thanks again for listening to The Book Stop. Bye!